Welcome to the Vibrant Guide podcast, where we explore the insights and strategies that drive success and fulfillment in both personal and professional lives. I'm your host, Anna, and today we have a truly special guest with us who is a global thought leader on one of the most critical topics of our time, burnout and workplace culture. Michael Levitt is a renowned keynote speaker, executive coach, and the host of the acclaimed Breakfast Leadership podcast, which has been recognized as one of the top 20 global thought leader podcasts. Through his work, Michael has become a beacon for those looking to prevent burnout and create thriving workplace environments. He's the author of several impactful books and has spent years coaching leaders and organizations on how to foster cultures that not only retain top talent, but also inspire and energize them. Today we're going to dive into Michael's expertise on burnout prevention, how to create workplaces where people are eager to work, and how to effectively work remotely without sacrificing your well-being. If you've ever felt overwhelmed by work or are looking for more ways to create a more balanced and productive life, this episode is for you. Michael, welcome to the Vibrant Guide podcast.
Good with you, Anna. I'm looking forward to our chat today.
Yeah, so just to start, let's, dive into burnout. Can you start by, sharing your personal story on burnout and how it led you to become a global thought leader on this topic?
Definitely didn't set out to be a burnout expert when I entered my career many years ago, but by fate and my own behaviors and actions, it kind of created the opportunity for it. So we'll go back in time a little bit to 2007. I was hired as a healthcare executive for a startup healthcare clinic. Now, what was interesting was I didn't have any healthcare experience. However, I had a lot of startup experience, worked for many startup companies over the years. That's the main reason why the organization hired me, because they knew that I would be able to navigate through the challenges of launching a new business. And I did. That organization still exists today. It's thriving. It's serving the community quite well. For me, I made a huge mistake when I was launching the business. Even though I was an employee, treated it as if it was my own company, which is not necessarily a bad thing per se, but I didn't have any boundaries around when I worked and when I didn't. So I was pretty much working from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. days a week for a solid 2 years. And when you put in those kind of hours, say other things in your life take a back seat. I wasn't taking care of myself from a physical standpoint, so no exercise to speak of. I wasn't doing anything fun in life, leisure activities at all. My eating was definitely not good because of all the hours I was working. I was pretty much trying to eat in between work and not making the best choices for food. And it all came to a crashing halt in May of 2009, where I was really burned out at that point. I was significantly stressed, overweight, just making mistakes at work, not sleeping, not doing fun things in life, all the things that can contribute to burnout. And over a period of a year, so from May 2009 to May 2010, the following happened to me. In May of 2009, I had a heart attack that should have killed me. And then 17 weeks later, during the Great Recession, I lost my job in an area that was heavily hit by the recession. So here I am, 17 weeks off of a heart attack, and now I don't have a job. And it took me several months and a relocation to a different city in order for me to find work. And, that was obviously stressful as you're recovering from having a heart attack. And after I did find a new job, a new city, it was far away, a good 4 hours away from where we were living. I was commuting back home on the weekends, so we found a place to move the family, a new city. And I get a phone call. It was like the second week I was working. And my oldest daughter, who was 10 years old at the time, called and said that the bank had come and they had taken away our family car because we weren't able to make payments for a long time. Because when you're on unemployment and you're also on new heart medication and no drug insurance, and it was costing me $1,000 a month for the medication, on top of food, on top of everything else, your ability to pay your bills, it's difficult. And I know a lot of people right now are really struggling with paying their bills, with rent costs, mortgage costs, food costs. Everything is just way too expensive no matter where you look. So people are really having a difficult time. So you can relate to what that feels like. It's not fun. So finally, after that, a place to move family to. So found a place we could rent. So we rented a place, moved everything, and then we forgot bunk bed ladder for our kids' bed back at the house that we were getting ready to sell. And back to that town the following weekend to grab the ladder and anything else that we may have left behind when the movers packed everything up. When I got to the house, there was a big padlock on the front door and a sticker on the door that said foreclosure. So in a year's time, I had a heart attack that should have killed me. I lost my job. I lost my car. I lost my home. All those things happened to me because I was burned out. Because I was burned out, those experiences and situations came to be because I wasn't taking care of myself, mistakes at work, and financially planning well, you name it. So all the things you're not supposed to do was doing. And the best thing that could have ever happened to me is it gave me an opportunity to set and make some necessary adjustments in my life that I needed to do. Before I continue, I just want to say one thing to people that are listening or watching. If you're burned out, I'm going to say 99% of you do not need to reinvent your life. You just have to make a couple adjustments here and there, and it'll make a huge, huge difference. In my personal situation, I felt it necessary to just completely reinvent who I am. And I did. Not easy, but you can do it. And I'm thankful that I did.
Wow, what, an inspiring story, especially being able to reinvent yourself after all of these terrible things happening. And what were some of the biggest challenges that you faced while you were recovering from burnout and reinventing your life? Like, what was that process like?
The first big challenge was just slowing down because for those 17 weeks after the heart attack, I was on medical leave, so I wasn't working. So I went from working all those hours to not doing anything at all. And that was a huge, huge adjustment for me to not do something, not to pick up, work on the computer, not do this, not call, not make meetings, all these things. I literally had nothing to do but rest and recover. Such a foreign concept for me initially, but thankfully it was a side effect with one of the medications that I was on at the time. It matter what, it didn't matter. 2 o'clock in the afternoon, needed to take a nap. Period. Full stop. My body just said, you're going to pass out if you don't go to bed. This is one of the negative side effects from one of the heart medications that I was on. I don't take that medication anymore, thankfully, but that was my built-in, you're going to take a nap. I hadn't taken naps in years other than maybe the fall occasionally. If I fell asleep watching a college football game in the recliner or something, then I'd fall asleep. But that was usually the only time that I'd ever take a nap. So it was a new thing for me to learn how to relax and rest again. So that was the biggest challenge of anything. Everything else was easy, but I approached my recovery with a childlike curiosity. Instead of beating myself up for having the heart attack and then, of course, not knowing at that particular point the things that were about to happen, but wouldn't beat myself up. Like, it happened. I can't change that. What can I do to change things so I don't have another one? Because I didn't want to have one in the first place. I certainly didn't want to have another one.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are all, great strategies to kind of, go about reinventing your life. So, how has your experience with burnout shaped the way you approach your work and leadership?
Big change for me is to understand when you're working with people, and you're also working with yourself, you have to understand has rhythms, and we all go through different patterns throughout our days where there's moments of our day where we have a little bit more energy or feel a little bit more alert or ability to take on additional things. And there are other parts of the day where we're like, "Oh, I can't. I'm just now my energy is a little sagging." So it's important to understand that not only for yourself as a manager or a leader, you need to understand that with your teams and employee. And this was actually a TikTok video I saw earlier this morning from a psychologist. And one of the big things you can do for your employees is a deep understanding of how they operate. Be more energetic in the morning or afternoon? What kind of work do they like to do? Is there a particular day of the week they like doing that work versus others? The more information you have on that, better it'll be, because what you do is then you create a work environment alongside the employee to design basically their best day. It's like, okay, what does my ideal Wednesday look like? Okay, what do I work on Wednesdays? Okay, this is what we're going to set it up. Of course, have the ability and the flexibility to shift some things around if you need to, but at least that way, if you're working with your team, designing their work days to they can be their best, they're going to be their best. And guess what? That's going to allow you as a leader to be your best. And you should do the same thing. And I think it's the biggest things that we're starting to see kind of flush out a little bit, especially with the remote work and everything else. There's more focus on design of the workday based on the individual and not the job title.
Yeah, I think that's definitely so important, optimizing the individual's workday because the individual is the one, doing the work. So that's, a great perspective to look at. And so how can someone differentiate between, normal everyday stress and, being on the verge of burnout?
Burnout is basically, and this is paraphrasing the World Health Organization, they actually gave a definition of burnout back in 2019 before the pandemic. And their definition was it was a workplace phenomenon that's caused by unaddressed and prolonged stress. So you can have stressful days. We all do. Stress is always going to be there. Stress is actually necessary because it does motivate us, condition us, and give us discipline to do things that we need to do. There's always projects we don't want to work on, but we want to get through them. That's one thing. But prolonged stress of working so many hours, not taking breaks, having issues at home, maybe there's financial challenges, maybe you don't get along with your boss, maybe you're in an environment that be laying off a bunch of people and you're not sure if you're going to get laid off. If you don't get laid off, then your workload's going to increase because they're not hiring anybody new. So it's like, would I rather be laid off or would I rather be stay here but then get too much work dumped on my plate? So when you have those prolonged, unaddressed, stressful situations, you're not doing things to address. That's when you get in trouble, and that's when it builds up over time. And when stress builds up over time and you haven't addressed it, that's when you start looking at being burned out.
I see. And as you mentioned earlier, you don't need to reinvent your whole life when you're experiencing burnout. But what are those immediate, small steps that people can take when they feel like they, have
First thing I is ask people is, let's examine your sleep habits. How are you sleeping? Usually if they're burned out, they're not sleeping well. And of course, I'll flush out, okay, has this been something that's gone on your entire life? Recent? Is it within the last couple of weeks, couple of months, couple of years? Give me an idea of what that looks like because it's a telltale sign because you don't get good sleep, that doesn't allow your body to repair the damage that we do to ourselves on a daily basis. You can live the healthiest of lifestyles, great foods, get plenty of exercise. We still damage ourselves on a daily basis, whether it's the information we consume, the world, it's easy to find negativity. It's harder to find the positive stuff, but you can find it. It's there. The negativity of life, conditions, air quality, weather changes, you name it. There's so many different things impact our physical body. And when we sleep, that's when your body allows itself to repair the damage that we've faced today. If you're not sleeping, damage doesn't get repaired, which happens. Then what happens is you basically have today's damage gets piled onto tomorrow's damage. And then the next day and the next day and the next week and the next month. And that's, basically what happened to me where damage was building up based on all the things that were happening. And that's how I end up having clogged arteries, which caused my heart attack. So not a, oh, I ate too much fried chicken yesterday, I'm going to have a heart attack tomorrow kind of thing. Likely, unless that's your dietary choices and your body doesn't break down those foods properly. And fortunately, the cholesterol will clog your arteries and you get to have a cardiologist, which it's good to have those if you heart health thing, but really, my goal is to hope people don't have heart attacks. They're not fun. They're not great to deal with. Well, sleep is definitely one of those things. Another sign, real quick, that you want to notice is things setting you off. Or you have a shorter fuse. If you're not typically an angry person or get angered easily, if you find yourself getting angered easy than before, definitely a warning sign to look out for. And I've seen that, unfortunately, a lot pandemic because it was just, I think a lot of people were really upset and frustrated about everything that's transpired. Doesn't matter political views, your views on masks and vaccines, none of that matters. I'm just focusing on the fact of how life was interrupted for all of us. Some people really had a difficult time with it and they're bitter about it, they're angry. And I'm one to say you have to find the way to move through it and move forward. You don't want to move on from it. It's always going to be there. It's like losing a family member. When people say, oh, it's time to move on. No, it's to move forward. It's not going to take away what happened to me, to you, or anybody else. But you have to figure out ways to move forward, because ideally you want to have the best ideal life for you, because the world needs you. Whoever is listening to this or watching this right now, the world desperately needs you. You're here for a reason. You create something or you provide something that benefits humanity. We need you, and we need you to be your best. So how does that work? Be your best. You figure out what it takes to make sure you're the best version of you. When you do that, life tastes better, you feel better, things don't bug you as easily, and all of that. But unfortunately, I'm seeing way too many people completely stressed out. And we're seeing stats where people under age 40 are having heart attacks a lot more than they used to. That's really scary for me. I was 40 when I had mine. I don't want to see people in their 30s having cardiac events. That is really problematic for a lot of reasons. So sleep, anger, and then another one is, and I kind of mentioned this before, when you're burned out and you're working all the hours and all of that, stop doing things in life you enjoy doing. That's not good. That makes it worse. You need to carve out time, no matter how little of time that is, the fun stuff, whether it's going and sitting in a coffee shop with your friends, or going out to the nightclub, or going to a sporting event, or whatever you like to do for fun. Continue doing that, even if it's just for a short period of time. So important for us to have leisure in our lives. And unfortunately, when people burn out, cut that out.
Yeah, I think that those are such great strategies. Like sleep is so critical. There's a reason why humans need sleep. And I also think that making time for leisure, making time, things that make you motivated to continue are so important. So that's all such awesome insights. And kind of transitioning to workplace culture and the Great Resignation. So the Great Resignation has been a significant trend recently. In your views, what are the factors that are kind of driving this movement?
Time when we were all sent home in March of 2020 to work remotely, might be from home or you might be working remotely somewhere else. A lot of people looked at it, and there was other terms that were used during that time. The Great Resignation, the Great Reset, the Great Reflection is another one that I've heard from time to time. I think a lot of people realized what work was for them, how it wasn't working for them. Because there wasn't really any option. Work, you go to work, and need people to work. That's how things get produced. And whether it's products or services, we all need to work. But challenge was, people realized that they weren't the workplace, and they had a little bit more flexibility and autonomy on how they designed their workday, started to realize that they enjoyed that flexibility a little bit more and the freedom. And we saw the stats. A lot of studies were shown that productivity levels were either the same or, depending on the industry, increased when people were working away from the office. So I see companies say, we have to get everybody back in the office. It is this is my opinion, so I want to frame it there. That highlights lack of management skill, managers. That lack of management skill that those managers have builds down to imposter syndrome that those managers have, because those managers lack self-confidence. They don't think that they're a good manager. They're scared. So what they do, in many cases, unfortunately, they act like a bully, or they, boss around and direct people, because they lack the self-confidence of being a manager. So many people that have been promoted into managerial roles never trained how to be a manager. Great, you're great at building these things. You're great at coding these things. You're great at customer service and all that. We're going to make you manager of that. It's awesome. Doing the things and managing the doing of the things are two different universes. Unfortunately, majority of managers, especially in the early days of their career, never properly trained on how to manage people, motivate people, how to create environments. And it's on those individuals to learn on their own, unfortunately, because organizations don't spend the time to do it. Few good ones do. Okay, we're going to send you, because we think you're going to be a manager, we're going to send you to managerial school and how to be a manager. Learned how to do these things is the same thing. Now you're going to learn how to be a manager. I find that was a big thing that flushed out of it was people that were working remotely, I got to go back and deal with that micromanaging manager. Thank you. I don't want to do that. So, they put up a fight, and there's been a tug of war, and it's still ongoing. Everybody wants, society is so instant, want things resolved quickly. This hybrid, in place, working fully remote, still evolving and will continue to do so for, I think, for a long time to come. But ultimately, it boils down to this. You want to serve your customers, because if you don't serve them, you don't have a company. Figure out the best way you can do that. Can it be hybrid? Can it be in person? Can it be remote? Can it be a mixture of all? It doesn't have to be an and a work thing. Everybody wants black and white. I've learned over my years, everything is gray. There's ebbs and flows to everything. So Great Resignation, long story short, came about because people were tired with the way working, and they didn't want to do it that way anymore. So started looking for opportunities, and the gig economy boomed during the early, post-pandemic days, continues to do so. See how things play out, but we're seeing more and more people take that extra step and be an entrepreneur themselves. Not easy, scary. I tell people it's a lot of times it's trading your 9 to 5 to 6 a.m. to midnight thing, similar to what I did before. So I always warn them, like, be careful with that. But it's interesting to watch the work trends as they evolve, and every few months, there's shifts that give us some indication of what it's going to look like. But then there's so many external things going on in the world that's playing a big part as well.
Yeah, so how can organizations, create a workplace culture that, retains employees and works for employees and, also attracts top
I
talent?
think, and this is a premise that, I go back to, and I mention this a lot on my show and in interviews I've done. I worked for an internet market research company back in 2000 at the tail end of the dot-com era. So yes, I'm that old. When I worked there, I remember my first day, my boss, his name is Rick, came up to me at 3:32, and this was in Chicago. It was 3:32 p.m. Central Time, and it was my first day there. And he came to my cubicle, leaned in, and he says, "Okay, I'm just going to lay down the ground rules, what it's going to be for you to work here." And I'm thinking, okay, here we go. It's going to be managing me, micromanaging me, not letting me do anything on my own or anything like that. Looks at me, goes, "I don't care when you get here. I don't care when you go home. As long as you get your work done, everything's good. Here's my cell number. Here on Mondays, Thursdays, and Fridays. I'm in the Virginia office Tuesdays and Wednesdays. Call me if you need anything. Have fun." And I stayed there and turned down job offers that paid me a whole lot more money to stay there. I stayed there for 3 years. And at that time, working in IT, no one stayed anywhere for 3 years because they just would go to different jobs because they were paying so much more money. I stayed because I thought this is a special place. And he made a huge impact on my career in those 3 years and how I approach how to lead people. And I use that speech a lot with people when I was leading organizations, whether it was healthcare or nonprofit or corporate or like that. I just, look, I'm hiring you to do this job. I want to make sure you have all the tools you need to do it really well. I want you to do it. I don't want to do it. That's why I hired you. Here's all the things you need. Here's how to reach me. If you need anything, let me know. I want to make this, create an environment where you can be as successful as you possibly can be. I want the more successful your team is, the more successful you're going to be as a manager in your company. You're going to do incredibly well. You're going to have people begging to work for you. You're going to have to go through hundreds, if not thousands, of resumes for people applying to work for your company because they know it's a great company there. They got great leadership. They take care of their people. I'm not talking just about money. A lot of people, oh, they must pay more. No, didn't give anybody any astronomical raises. Were paid what market, maybe a little bit above, depending on the role. Ultimately, it was just creating an environment where people could create. Like, what do you want to do? What do you think about this? And involve people too. And I think that's, people feel like that their voice is being heard. And this is something that I thoroughly enjoy because I'm Gen X as far as age group. Millennial generation, Gen Z, and then Gen Alpha is coming, the workforce as well. What I love about those generations is a voice. Number two, they're demanding it. They need to have it. Why? Because your insights are critical, changing the way work is. Because the way the work is isn't working anymore. We saw that with the Great Resignation. The pandemic, as much as we all hate happened and transpired, the lives lost, the interruptions, all of that, created an opportunity for us to redesign work that benefits the employee, lets us be the best versions of us so we can create the best products and services possible. And us as a society, we benefit from that. We're going to get better stuff. That's want environments to do that, because if you make better stuff, it's going to make the world better. So, I celebrate fact that the younger generations now are pushing this and changing the way things are done because it was desperately overdue.
Yeah, wow, Michael, that's such an incredible perspective, and I wish that more, managers were like that because I genuinely feel like it would lead to so much more productivity and just so many benefits to society. So, what are, a lot of the mistakes that you see managers and leaders making when, they're trying to improve workplace
A
culture?
lot of it goes down to, well, maybe we give them better benefits. And again, these are not bad things per se. It boils down to they need to actually understand what their employees need, whether it's flexible hours or more remote hours or who knows, all kinds of different things. Because we saw during the pandemic, my brother was a great example of this. The beginning of the pandemic, our father passed away, so he became a full-time caregiver for our mom and did that for 4 years. And thankfully where he worked created an opportunity where he could work remote. And so that was very helpful. But a lot of organizations and a lot of jobs you can't do that. If you work in a warehouse, you're on the warehouse assembly line per se, and boxing and packaging and things like that. Really hard to do that remotely. Same thing with healthcare. If you're a nurse, kind of hard to do a lot of that work remotely. Some of you can, initial patient calls and things like that, but if you're in an emergency room, you're physically there. You're there. So there's a lot of jobs that just cannot be done remotely. So we have to understand that and go, okay, what can we do to make this easier on people? One, felt this for a long time. I think many organizations are desperately understaffed and they need to figure out ways to do that, and correct that. How? That's a long conversation. It's a lot of people at a table kind of flushing that out, and how does that look and what can we do? I think simplification is a big thing that organizations can do. They want to bring on more people is don't make as many things as you do. If you're a company that makes a bunch of things, simplify, really good at the things that you make, generate enough revenue so you can bring on more people. Again, this is not a overnight fix type of thing, but I think for mistakes that a lot of managers make is they think that, okay, we'll give them better benefits or we'll throw a pizza party at them or things like that. That's not going to make things better for them. People are struggling right now, whether financially or personally. And it goes back to just understanding who your people are. Even if you're a big company, you've got managers that are leading a small team. That manager should know how to connect with those people. Again, it's people are better wired for it than others. A colleague of mine who's in the leadership space, I won't mention her name, but she publicly declared she actually had to go to get empathy training because she had no ability to be empathetic towards people. Didn't. I've known her for years. It kind of surprised me because, like, I don't see that. But, she explained, the situation. I'm like, oh, okay, now I understand. Yeah, she actually got training on how to be more empathetic because she wasn't. She didn't care. And if unfortunately threw a few curveballs at her, and she had a couple health scares. And I think probably good that she took the empathy classes before all those things happened to her because I think, probably helped her heal quicker because she had a better understanding of it and didn't have that hard back in the face like I had for me. But I think managers, again, dealing with human beings, you need to be more human towards them. Yes, I know there's the authority and all of that, but as we're seeing, and again, kudos to Gen Y, Gen Z, and Gen Alpha, all the generations that'll follow after that, we're we're getting kind of past this hierarchy type of thing and more of a flat type of situation where we're all working together for a greater good. There's people that oversee things and guide us and tell us we should work on this and this. It's not the rental, you need to clean up your room right now, otherwise no dessert kind of thing. It's like that's not working. It didn't work for the kids. It's not working in the workplace. So ultimately, it's just being more human. I think it's going to be a big help for organizations going forward.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you. Like being human, it not only helps the organization because the workers are more productive, but it also helps the workers because now the workers aren't miserable. So it's just such a win-win. And how can employees set boundaries, with remote work to
This is
prevent
a big
burnout?
one because much as employees stumbled and complained about the workday, there were some boundaries or silos or at least guide rails on the workday when you worked and when you didn't. We all looked at the clock. Okay, what time? Time for a break. Okay. Oh, time to go to lunch. Okay. Oh, time for another break. Oh, time to go home or time for a meeting. So we had these scheduled interruptions or meetings or things in our workday, which forced us to get up from our chair, go out and take it, things like that. When we all went home or started working remotely, those things weren't in place for people. So what had happened would be they would just literally sit down on their couch, not ergonomic, or their chair, whatever, and just work away long hours. I had many conversations with people that said, "Yeah, I had to start going to a chiropractor because sitting at home, I was doing some damage to myself, and I'm all stiff, and I need some adjustments and things like that." So the things I told people is like, okay, if your company will pay for it, yourself a really small desk or a standing desk or this chair. Make sure your home office is as ergonomic as your workplace was, because if not, you're going to have some problems, physical problems, which contribute to mental strain, which can be a real slippery slope. So boundaries around when you work, when you don't. These little devices, I call this my iBinky. That's my nickname, or the nickname that my brother gave me for my iPhone because I'm always on the thing. He calls it an iBinky, like a pacifier for a baby. The beautiful thing about those devices is they allow you to work anywhere at any time. The disadvantage is you can work anywhere at any time. That's what a lot of people did. They get up in the morning, they start on email. They haven't even washed their face or brushed their teeth. They just start working. You have to establish when you work and when you don't. And because we're not, as humans, not designed to be 24/7. Our bodies cannot do that, nor should we be expected to from a work situation. So you have to establish those boundaries. When let's say you were working in an office and then you went remote. Okay, when were you working during the day? Does that still work at home? Because especially during the pandemic in the early days when many people had school-age children, they realized, hey, my kids were in class the same time that I was working. Well, I'm doing the teaching job, making sure that they're working on their computer, not on their PlayStation. Okay. So all of a sudden, people's work days started to shift a little bit, where maybe they got up earlier to do some work and then they worked into the evening. So it was a mess for a lot of people, but it did create a lot of discovery for some people. They realized, many people, that they are really productive, like from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m., like crushing it type of work, or early in the morning. So the employers that were okay with it, they would say, you know what, we'll change your work schedule, work those hours. Well, it's a lot of it is trial and error. And as much as we as humans don't necessarily like that, that's the only way that we've ever created anything in life, is through testing things out, trying them. If they work, great. If they don't, figure out what didn't work. Long story short, you got to have boundaries around when you're working and when you don't. And try not to have your work setting at home be the same place that you sit and watch Netflix or eat dinner or anything like that. Do your best. I know some people, if you're in a studio, kind of hard. You're renting a room and you literally use a bedroom for your everything room. Figure out ways to, okay, work is done. Close the laptop down or put a blanket over it or something. Just to separate the work day to non-working hours.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such a good strategy because it's so easy, as you said, with all these devices and, being home, you can just be on your phone and be checking your emails 24/7. So that's such a great strategy. And, as an executive coach, what are some of the most common leadership challenges that you've seen,
A lot of
through your
it,
coaching?
and it's one of those things where I don't share who I worked with because some of them are publicly traded companies, and if word got out that the CEO of this company was having issues, personal issues, then their stock could drop, and I don't want to cause financial loss to anybody, so I don't tell people who I work with because it's affected my healthcare career. You don't talk about health diagnoses for patients, so I apply the same rules to the people I work with. One of the common things that I've seen in leaders is trying to do, and some of it is driven by their board of directors pushing for them to do much. In many cases, it's a communication gap and between the board and the leader. And that communication gap can be fixed by just saying, okay, here's all the things that are on my plate. What are the top two priorities that I should focus on right now? More than two. If you start doing more than two priorities, you're watering down what you're doing and you're not going to do great work. You need to do one or two things really, really well, finish them, see them through, and you can continue on the other stuff. It doesn't mean you can't be working on that other stuff, especially if you're a CEO, you likely have a team. There's other things that you're working on, but you got to prioritize. You really got to get narrow focused on what you're working on. And also, too, a big challenge, and I had this myself early on in my career, is delegation. I was horrible at delegating. I couldn't delegate things because I didn't want to overwork my employees, which was a noble thing, but I was overwhelming myself. That's not good. So I see that a lot with executives where they're just overwhelmed. And, there was a stat from a couple of years ago where almost 70% of CEOs, in big corporations were thinking of just, I'm walking away from this, I'm leaving. That is so disruptive for companies. When their CEO leaves, it is very disruptive. Just like if you lose a key coworker or key employee, it hurts. But when you lose your CEO, unless they've got a really strong leadership team that can kind of pick up the pieces until a new one is appointed, it can be really disruptive to the company. It's publicly traded, the investments, public opinion, you name it. It can go bad really fast. So I think it's important for CEOs and executives to focus on their own well-being first so they can be the best version that they can be, because when you are your best, then you see things, you have more clarity, you can do things better, you just are a better human being and a better employee, a better leader, a better family member, better friend, you name it.
Yeah, that's really awesome advice. And I feel like even in my own life, prioritization and delegation are such, big challenges. It's so easy to want to do a million things at once. And when you do, who do you divide the work to? So that's a really valid struggle, but something that's so important to overcome to, live your best life. So, finally, like what's the most important piece of advice that you would, give my audience for people that want to achieve long-term success without, sacrificing their health and well-being, but still being able
Me, I
to
mean,
achieve
we've
their
we've
goals?
touched on so many of them, but I'll kind of summarize them in some bullet points. One, invest in your sleep. Instead of buying the brand new iPhone or latest tablet or biggest television or anything like that, you can invest as much as you can in the best bedding, the best mattress, the best pillow, the best sheet or the best sheets, blankets, all that stuff. If we go to a resort or a really nice hotel, we fall into the bed and it typically is like, it feels so amazing. This bed is so comfortable. Guess what? You can have that same experience at home because they sell those beds at quality there. So spend the money on your bedding, because if you get 8 hours of sleep, you're in that bed for 8 hours. So that's a third of your day. So why not make it awesome? Because if you get good rest, we talked about that. You are better, your cognitive ability is better, your digestive system is better, you break down foods better, everything becomes better. Really make sure you do things in life you enjoy doing. Schedule them. Say, yeah, I'm going to do that. No, schedule. Literally, everyone's using a calendar now on their phone or on their computer. Schedule it. As silly as it sounds, like, okay, I'm going to the nightclub Thursday night, or I'm going to this concert on Wednesday at St. Andy's Hall or whatever, and you put it on there. Literally put it on there, because what gets scheduled gets done, whether it's personal fun stuff or stuff. If you share a calendar, you obviously got to be private. Don't put any real personal information on there that could be embarrassing, but schedule those things. Obviously, eating the right foods for you is really important. I'm not going to tell you not to eat the fast food. If you want to, go for it. But ideally, figure out the foods that give you the natural energy boost that you need, and that'll help you with your sleep. It'll also help you with your cognitive ability and all that good stuff. So figure out what foods are good for you. Try them out. Test them out. There's so many those meal delivery programs are a great. I don't plug any of them. I don't have any affiliate codes or anything like that for any of them. But pick one of those things, because if you don't know how to cook, they're a great way to learn how to cook. And if you do know how to cook, it gives you some different ideas on different recipes, and try different things, and you'll find what you like to eat. And food and good sleep, you get those two right, then pretty much everything else can kind of fall in line a lot easier. So those are just three real quick things that people can do to basically design their ideal life. And lastly, this is one thing that a lot of people struggle with. You got to figure out what makes you tick. You got to do a deep dive, and I think a lot of people are scared of doing that. They're scared of looking within because they're afraid of what they're going to see. Don't be afraid. You. Fine. Things have happened in your life that may be good, bad, and different. Approach it with a childlike curiosity. It's like, okay, yeah, that happened. Not happening now. Can I learn from it? What can I do to move on from that? And move forward, excuse me. It's a very key differentiator word. Instead of saying move on, say move forward. Because moving on is like you're leaving and you'll never address it again. Things happen to us that are going to stay with us forever. It doesn't matter what it is. So move forward. You're going to live the ideal best life. So you do those things, that's going to give you the best fighting chance to keep stress at bay and prevent burnout in your life.
Yeah, that's amazing advice. And Michael, what's next for you? Like, what are your long-term goals and what are your projects?
For me, there's
what kind of
a
are you
lot of
excited
things always
about?
on the plate. The things I do have, thank you for mentioning earlier. I've got my own podcast show. I've been doing that since 2017. Have a blast with that. A lot of writing at the Breakfast Leadership website. There's article link. There's articles that are posted pretty much every day on different business tips and personal tips and things like that. Do some keynote speaking. I've quieted down a little bit over the last year because I was getting really tired of going to the airport every week, so I decided let's scale that back and get back into the creative juices of the show and of writing and whatnot. And sure, something will come up for me to do. I'm one of those people that, because I sleep well and eat decently and enjoy life, things come up and I go, huh, you know what? That sounds like fun. Who knows? Maybe I'll put some music out. We'll see. Anything's possible.
Yeah, that's awesome. And where can our listeners
Place
connect
to
with
go
you
is
and find more about your work?
breakfastleadership.com. All my socials are, you'll see at the top of the page, or if it's on a phone, I think it's might be at the bottom page, but you'll see all the links to the different social media channels. And then there's links to my articles, podcasts, the shows that I've been on, articles that I've written, publications that I've been in, whether it's, major news networks or people that are doing everyday things that are making this world better. So breakfastleadership.com is the best place to find me. If you want a free copy of my burnout proof book, then just go to breakfastleadership.com/burnout book and just give me your name and email, and I'll send you a copy of it, PDF copy of it, no charge, no obligation. I'm not trying to sell you anything. If you want to buy something from me, I'm sure I can find something to sell you. Got online courses and other things like that too. But yeah, breakfastleadership.com is the best place to find me.
That's awesome. Yeah, well, thank you so much, Michael, for joining us. It was amazing hearing your story and your incredible advice. And thank you, listeners, for tuning into this week's episode of the Vibrant Guide podcast. I will see you all next week.